Good morning, everybody, from Tornado Alley. We are down in southwestern Kansas right now, and there is a large-scale enhanced risk that stretches from southwestern Nebraska all the way down to the Texas Panhandle, and there is a slight risk across western South Dakota as well. And it looks to me like this is going to be more of a classic bimodal type of a severe weather event. You're going to have a northern cluster of severe weather reports, likely across western South Dakota, and you're also going to have a southern cluster of severe weather reports, probably down in the Texas Panhandle. Likely also will have severe weather in between across western Kansas, but I do believe that I'm seeing a classic bimodal type of a setup that could be happening despite the enhanced risk stretching across the entire warm sector. And I do believe that Panhandle Magic is going to be our target area today. But a lot of people are also heading up to western South Dakota, and I do think that there is a decent chance of tornadoes up there as well. Kind of a pinch zone, a bit of a wraparound that is anticipated across that area. And I want to break down the newest model guidance. It is just now starting to come in here, the 12Z model guidance. We're going to break that down as well. But I wanted to start off with the SPC outlook showing you that enhanced risk, but a slight risk all the way up into western South Dakota, where I think that there is also a threat of a northern cluster of severe weather reports, including the threat of tornadoes out there. Here is your trough. It's a large open wave. You still have the consolidated polar front jet stream meandering across the United States. You have a trough across the western U.S. and a ridge across the east. That's a negative P&A pattern. And that's what we expect to be encouraged during this spring storm season, all the way up probably until later spring. And then I expect this thing to shut down with a step function with a vengeance. And then you're probably going to have drought conditions that are going to take over across the high plains and the Great Plains. A big discussion amongst storm chasers and weather enthusiasts is, will this be a 2011 or is it going to be more of a 2012? And I think that the answer is that it's already been more like a 2011. You had the record-breaking March for severe weather, drastically above normal during March. The season did get started a lot earlier than 2011, more similar to a 2012. 2011 was more of a year two La Nina event as well. But I believe that you're going to have a very active May as well across the Great Plains, similar to 2011, despite the early start to the severe weather season. Today, you're going to have a surface low that's going to rocket up toward the Nebraska Panhandle. And you could play the surface low. That's the northern mode of severe weather that's going to be clustered around western South Dakota. There is going to be a late arrival of this trough. So this is right now, as of this morning, earlier this morning, the trough just digging down, bottoming out into the southwestern U.S. Ski jump configuration seems to be aimed at western Kansas, doesn't it? With that nose poking right up into western Kansas. A little bit less flow, more of a glancing blow down into the Texas Panhandle. Sometimes that can be encouraged. You can have some more backed winds down there, more terrain influence off the cap rock, slightly better moisture. And anytime you get a 60 dew point in the Texas Panhandle this early in the season, usually it's mass chaos with Panhandle Magic, severe weather potential as well. And you can also see those jet streaks that are going to be coming around the south side of this disturbance. So I think that I'm leaning a little bit toward Panhandle Magic, just because of experience, and I know what these a 60 dew point can do down into the Texas Panhandle. Looking at 21Z, I want to show you closer to peak heating. Way off to the north, that's where the surface low is going to eject. There's not as much in the way of strong upper level flow across western South Dakota, but that is where the surface low heads. But look at the ski jump. It does appear that there's also a bit of a jet max that arrives in the Texas Panhandle right at about peak heating. That's going to be like 4 to 7 p.m. when that arrives down in the Texas Panhandle. Slightly more westerly, mid and upper level flow as well across the Texas Panhandle. Jet streak arrives across western Kansas right at about 7 p.m. A bit more of a diffuse upper level jet pattern across the Nebraska Panhandle and into southwestern South Dakota. But you definitely have strong meridional upper level flow here. So the supercells are going to be moving from south to north, just on the north side of that surface low. And there is a bit of a dry line, a west to east oriented dry line that's going to set up across that target area, almost like an Alberta dry line, except across southwestern South Dakota, Nebraska Panhandle as well. Could certainly see that mode happening. So there's the low level jet. This is the 850 millibar winds that you're seeing right here. That is oh so important for tornado genesis, is the low level wind shear when it's coupled with surface-based instability. This, however, is a very complicated forecast. You've got a surface low that is ejecting up to the northern mode. It's relatively early in the season to be targeting the northern plains. Look at that Colorado low, 985 surface low that's going to be marching off to the northeast. But it's still back in northeast Colorado at 0Z at the NAM. So the timing isn't perfect for southwestern South Dakota, but it does set up a west to east oriented dry line into the Nebraska Panhandle. Definitely a massive mega dry slot that punches into the Nebraska Panhandle. And one thing I want to talk about today is the extreme fire danger, basically equivalent to a high risk fire danger across eastern Colorado, down into eastern New Mexico as well, including the foothills, including Denver, Colorado Springs as well, I-25 corridor there, fast moving wildfires, grass fires, potentially destructive wildfires as the surface low moves through. South of the surface low, very dry conditions. And that's going to be across eastern Colorado. Look at this dry punch into the Nebraska Panhandle. That is also going to bring with it the fire danger. Very gusty southwesterly winds, very dry, dew points into the teens and 20s across the central high plains. And then you get a little bit of wraparound, some 50s dew points wrapping around into southwestern South Dakota. So will supercell storms be able to form and cross this boundary? That's a dry line right here. So it's a west to east oriented dry line. This is also the dry line oriented north-south across the Colorado-Kansas border, down across the Texas Panhandle, New Mexico border as well. Anytime you get 60s dew points in the Texas Panhandle banked up against a dry line like this, look out. Panhandle magic is likely for that zone. But I do see a bimodal setup possible. Maybe southwestern South Dakota could happen right along the surface low track, even though the surface low lags back a little bit behind that clear slot. I could see the potential of a supercell possibly even producing some tornadoes with east-northeasterly surface winds up just to the east of the Black Hills. But I think down here where you get the 60 dew points banked up against the dry line, very stout dry line as well. Dew point temperatures dropping into the 20s and teens back behind that sharp dry line. Definitely will be more than sufficient to generate supercell storms down in that environment. Probably a tornado threat between about 7 and 9 p.m. And also look how the low-level jet is maximized down here. Even though this is closer to the surface in the Texas Panhandle, very strong low-level jet associated with that trough. Usually I use 700 millibars to get an idea of where the strongest low-level jet is across the high plains, just a higher elevation. And you don't really have that strong of a low-level jet across the northern mode up into southwestern South Dakota up there. We're looking at a large-scale view right now, and it's just not as strong up there, even at 700 on the east side of the Black Hills. But you do have those easterly surface winds up there, a belt of easterlies that could help enhance low-level directional shear for a northerly moving storm. But look at the magnitude in the low-level jet down in the Texas Panhandle. That is a nasty environment down there. And in general, we can look at the 0 to 3 kilometer energy helicity index, get an idea of the greatest co-location of the low-level wind shear with surface-based instability. And look at the wraparound arm all the way through the south side of the Black Hills, far northern Nebraska Panhandle. Our buddy Dan Fitz is going to be covering this wraparound arm as well. That's pretty good 0 to 3 kilometer shear, exacerbated by those easterly surface winds. And then you can also see a cluster of bright colors down into the Texas Panhandle, showing you that Panhandle magic as well down there. So you can already see kind of a bimodal type of a setup. It's probably going to be capped on the nose of the bulge, nosing into southeastern South Dakota, despite the bright colors there. But this is a west to east oriented dry line, like an Alberta dry line into the Nebraska Panhandle. Crazy availability of dry air dominating the western U.S. with this year 2 La Nina. And then you get a dry line off to the south, right along the Colorado-Kansas border, down across the Texas-New Mexico border as well. And looking at the upper levels, I'll always like to start off at the level of non-divergence in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, just to get a good idea of the trough shape. It almost looks like we have a slight negative tilt to the trough axis too. A classic open wave here, open storm system. A consolidated polar front jet stream, as you often see with these year 2 La Nina events, with a cold PDO in the northeastern Pacific, a warm blob across the northwest Pacific as well. And because of this negative tilt, strong open wave, a lot of vorticity advection downstream, you generate a large scale low-level jet as well that's only going to intensify as you go from 7 to 8 p.m. Look at that. And also look just to the east of the surface low by 7 to 10 p.m. And I think there's going to be blizzard conditions that will develop behind the system on Saturday across western South Dakota. Let's step a little bit forward through the day on Saturday and look at that. Blizzard conditions across the northern high plains, dominating the Black Hills as well. That's Saturday at 18Z. And we'll likely either be targeting the surface zone 985 low up in northern Minnesota or in a southern extension of the low-level jet on Saturday. I could see there being a cluster of severe weather, central and southern Kansas as well. You can see still a 50 to 60 knot low-level jet extending down into the southern plains. That low-level jet goes all the way up into Minnesota, covering multiple states as well. So I think that could be a pretty dangerous day on Saturday. I do have a slight southern plains bias, this time of year especially. And now I want to break down, I know we're on the NAM model. I also want to break down some of the other convective allowing models. We'll focus on 0Z for that dry line just as the low-level jet is starting to ramp up. Look at that 50 knot wind just above the ground, and it's a little bit backed as well down into the Panhandle. I'm going to ship on over to the high resolution NAM. Definitely has enhanced 850 winds as well across northwest Kansas into southwestern Nebraska. Could be a target area there as well. Even though I say bimodal, I still think there's going to be severe weather in between the two clusters of severe weather. I could just see this arm being a producer of supercells to the north across the Nebraska-South Dakota border. I could also see down south, juicy moisture, 60-plus dew points banked right up against the dry line. 3-kilometer NAM says all hell breaks loose in the Texas Panhandle tonight. If you want to base it on the HRRR helicity tracks and you want to be on the northern supercells just to the south of the Black Hills, probably from Shadron area all the way up into southwestern South Dakota, cluster of supercells into southwestern Nebraska, convex on the dry line, and then look at these bombs as well down in the Texas Panhandle, down near Amarillo, central, southern Texas Panhandle. Looks like a pretty dangerous environment down there with a low-level jet just slamming up against the southern side of these storms. These, I think, are going to be tornado producers in the Amarillo area. Anytime you get these 60 dew points down in the Texas Panhandle this time of year, it's usually pretty crazy. Very steep lapse rate, 77 over 62, manageable temperature dew point spreads, big cape. Hodograph seems supportive of tornadoes as well, even at 0Z. At 8 p.m., it gets even more favorable for tornadoes as a low-level jet boosts all the way up across the 50 knots area. This is a textbook Panhandle magic hodograph for tornadoes. You have a lot of easterlies as well, but this is an open wave, so you don't have those due easterlies up to 2 kilometers flipping around to westerly. Definitely more of an early season Panhandle magic day with a synoptically dynamic storm system as well. So one thing I'm seeing, though, further north across western Kansas is this double dry line structure that tries to develop. That's another thing that I like about the Texas Panhandle is that these 60-degree dew points are banked up right against the dry line in the southern mode. Up north, you get a little bit more separation of those dew points, and then you get the massive east to west oriented dry line up along the Nebraska-South Dakota border. Southeast, east side of the Black Hills certainly could be supercells up there as well. Looking at the hodographs, incredible hodograph products, really coined by Cameron J. Nixon, a great scientist who came up with the overlay. Each grid point having these forecast hodographs being displayed to get an idea of where the most favorable hodograph shapes overlay with surface-based instability. If I was going to be targeting the arm across southern South Dakota, I'd want to see a lot more favorable hodographs, and we're probably not resolving the hodographs in that very thin line. But it looks like the low-level shear is a bit lacking up there. And when we looked at the low-level jet, definitely some weaker 850 winds, weaker 700 winds further north. I just cannot find a lot of strong flow up there. But there is a lot of directional shear. Easterly surface winds flipping around to southwesterly aloft across southern South Dakota, right near the Nebraska-South Dakota border. And then down here into the Texas Panhandle, very favorable hodographs for tornado potential, and they only get better with time. That's at 7 p.m. This is at 8 p.m. Look at these photographs elongate. Massive curvature, big time low level wind shear. All the way down into the Panhandle, continues to increase with time. It's likely going to be a nocturnal severe weather event as well that continues probably till about 10 p.m. before they congeal into a bunch of complexes of storms overnight. So to me, this is definitely, look at that skinny arm. The 3-kilometer NAM definitely shows a very skinny wraparound target across South Dakota. A little bit better on the HRRR, which is a model that's notorious for over-mixing the high plains. But even with the HRRR over-mixing, you still have a very favorable thermodynamic environment down across the Texas Panhandle. Marches the dry line a little bit further east, and the 3-kilometer NAM is showing a slightly skinnier arm right up against the Black Hills. Let's look at a forecast sounding. There is going to be some thermodynamic issues potentially up there as well. Just to the east of the Black Hills, Rapid City, you have east-northeasterly surface winds. Low-level inflow definitely has a northerly component. A little bit of a capping inversion as well. But the models do show supercell storms up there, of course, probably motherships evolving in this environment. But normally when you have a northerly component to your surface wind, I know that these can produce up there. You had the Faith, South Dakota event well to the northeast of the Black Hills last year that produced some tornadoes. I'm just having a hard time finding good forecast soundings up there. But with those northeasterly surface winds, sometimes you'll get slightly elevated supercell storms as well. Likes to pull in a little bit of stable air at the low levels. A lot of times you get a little bit of a capping inversion, but that's some pretty steep low-level lapse rates further north. Decent directional shear especially. That's certainly a strength of the northern mode. Large cape as well. Probably gorilla hail producing supercell storms further north. Moving into the southwestern portion of the state. Let's look at the updraft helicity tracks, and you can certainly see these supercells trying to develop late across western South Dakota. Northeasterly moving supercells. This is probably the storm you'd want to be on a little bit further east of the Black Hills. And these are certainly going to evolve in that environment, developing relatively late, but certainly daytime initiating storms. Could be tornado producers as well. So certainly if you want to base your forecast on the HRRR updraft helicity tracks, you want to be on those northerly moving supercells. 3-kilometer NAM also shows a pretty nasty supercell track. Northern Nebraska Panhandle on the southeastern periphery of the Black Hills as well. That's a pretty nasty target. But further south, you also do have some helicity tracks down into the Texas Panhandle. That's even the HRRR. The 3-kilometer NAM is likely going to have some greater ones down there. Look at the 3-kilometer NAM dominating the southern plains. Southwest of Amarillo, tracking those east-northeast through the target area, central, southern Texas Panhandle. So it's becoming pretty obvious to me. We're obviously committed to the southern mode already, and that's certainly my plan. I had to do kind of a quicker severe weather update this morning because it is time for us to hit the road. Team Dominator working Panhandle magic today, probably chasing the Wichita area tomorrow with that 50-knot low-level jet to the east of a pretty sharp dry line. Even though the dry line is oriented south-southwest to north-northeast, I think there's going to be isolated storms in there, but also a northern cluster of supercells in the pine forest of northern New Mexico seems very likely. Northern Minnesota, excuse me, tomorrow looks quite likely. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this weather report. I had to keep it a little bit simple today, a little dumbed-down version of this weather briefing. We can't just do a full hands-on deck approach because I've got to drop down to this target area in the Texas Panhandle, where I think Panhandle magic is going to be happening later on today. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to my morning weather briefing. We're going to hit the road. We're going to be live streaming. Hit that subscribe button, notifications as well, because we're going to be going live later on this afternoon as we get closer to the Texas Panhandle target. Good luck, everybody. Stay tuned to severe weather watches and warnings up and down the slight and enhanced risk areas. Basically, the Dakotas all the way down to the southern high plains, and in fact, all the way down to the Rio Grande River. Could be severe weather potential, but it does seem like the short fuse models are starting to hone in on the Texas Panhandle.